I've always taken the faith for granted. It's never been something that I've questioned. So then I start dating Amber. It was senior year in high school. And it was fine, and she'd attend Mass with us occasionally. And we attended Gonzaga. It was a freshman year in Gonzaga. And I'll never forget when she really, there were little things she'd ask about, but it was never, so this one evening at Gonzaga, she's just really drilling me. Why do you worship Mary? What is this about the saints? Aren't you worried about hell?
When I was told that this was the reading that I would get, I felt like I couldn't relate to really any other Bible character, maybe more than the blind man. It just seemed like a perfect match, because I feel like my blindness ran so deep.
So in reading the gospel, it's always a good idea to try to place yourself in the gospel and ask yourself, what is Jesus telling me? And I think in this story, it's easy to identify as the blind man. Absolutely. We all have these blind spots. But the end of this gospel in particularly is pretty jarring, what Jesus says to the Pharisees. And I can't help but think that I'm the Pharisee in that sense, that Jesus is pointing out that you think you see clearly? You might not have it all together like you think you do. And if we think we have it all together, then we're not seeking help, and we're not seeking Jesus. And so we're guilty. That's what he's saying is, you who have always been Catholic, you who have had the scriptures, you should know me. And if you know me, that should affect every aspect of your life, everything you do.
The real point where I feel like my conversion started was actually an argument with a professor. I decided to start the argument on the nature of hormonal birth control. And after that class, I just decided I was so right, just like the Pharisees. Kind of felt like they were so right in their opinions, but they were so blind. I decided to go do some research of my own to support my own opinions and my own argument even further. But I looked into the direct facts, like just the medical prescription information on hormonal birth control. I looked up scientific research on it. And by the end of my research, I was completely convicted. I realized that hormonal birth control actually affects the uterus in a way that kind of distorts it, and a fertilized egg that would maybe naturally implant in the uterus could potentially be expelled from the body, which just at least with my Christian upbringing, I knew all life is sacred, and I knew that conception is the beginning of life. And so I realized that if I decided that I wanted to be on birth control or hormonal birth control when I got married, which even freshman year I was considering marriage or looking toward marriage. But I knew that if I used that, I could potentially kill one of my children through the medication. I did know that this would not be an option when I got married. And so I had a lot more blindness to overcome. I had a lot more to learn. But I recognized that the Catholic Church was right on this one point. Catholic Church says no hormonal contraception is not okay. And it was really rough to admit that the Catholic Church was right there.
It was a big relief and a shock to me when Amber was digging into this and looking into this, because again, I knew that birth control was condemned by the church. I knew that it was not a good thing, and she knew that I didn't, I don't think so highly of this, but I also knew that she thought very strongly of it, and I did not have the strong convictions. I just knew, well, this is wrong, I think. And I likely would have caved in, when we were married, had she not had this experience, looking into the mechanisms, the three mechanisms of hormonal birth control, and found out that one of the mechanisms is abortive. We probably would have been on hormonal birth control in our early years of marriage. Thanks be to God, we took a marriage course and were introduced to NFP.
The natural family planning classes we took definitely satisfied my kind of need for a scientific method. It was very, very well researched, very, very scientific. And so that actually was very comforting as we were preparing for marriage a few years after my contraceptive discovery. So I am so thankful that we were introduced to natural family planning. It was not something that was particularly emphasized in our marriage preparation classes, but we went with it, and we reached out separately to schedule for training and everything. And I do believe that also helped open both of us up to a greater understanding of what it means to be a human person, just body and soul, to just respect our bodies so much and to understand your body so much more is a huge gift.
I think there's a natural tendency for us when we're trapped in ourselves. We want to control our world. We have a vision for what we think we want. Birth control absolutely plays into this. So, I want these many kids when I'm this old, and it's going to be a boy and a girl. And NFP really helps to remind you that no, God, has a plan for you, and He has a something that you can't even imagine. So you think you want something, right? But when you are able to give that up to God, He will give you something that you can't even imagine. I can't imagine looking at any one of my children and saying, I really wish I didn't. I really wish I stopped at this number. Or, each one is an incredible blessing. And when we try to control our lives, it's so limited, it's so small. But when we give it over to Jesus, when we allow Jesus into our life to open our eyes, gradually, right? Tell me, the blind man says, "Tell me who he is, so that I may believe in him."
But I think back to the blind man, and truly, his healing, he had clay rubbed into his eyes, clay and spit rubbed into his eyes in order for his healing to take place. That must have been a pretty kind of unpleasant thing. And so my blindness was also very unpleasant to kind of find out what that blindness was. It's hard, very hard, to recognize that you've held on to this misperception for so long. Or it's also very hard to see and then to know that your future has to change, that your path is going to be different.
C.S. Lewis has a beautiful image in in his book, The Great Divorce, which these souls in hell essentially are given the chance after death to decide if they're going to make the journey, to the distant country, heaven. And he plays with this idea of reality, right? So Jesus is the truth. And when the blind man recognizes the truth, he's willing to sacrifice all for him. And so C.S. Lewis has these characters who, even the grass at the foothills of heaven, are more real than their shades. It pierces their feet. But when they decide to accept Jesus, when they decide to go on that journey, to leave their self-insulated worldview and have a broader, to be able to open their eyes, they become more substantial themselves. The closer you come to realizing what is true and living an authentic life in accordance with what is true, what is real, the more real you become, the more substantial your life becomes.
My struggle with kind of accepting the church's teaching on various things, including initially contraception, was my lack of understanding with what it means to be a human person, and particularly for me, a woman, what femininity is. But I think that just we are body and soul. We are not just one or the other. They are combined, and it matters so much what we do with each of those. And I think that also kind of finally realizing that Christ actually founded the church. I know, for Stephen, it was kind of like that. But for me, it was not that obvious. Remember, I associate with the blind man. I was absolutely 100% blind to it. To all of it. But just recognizing that Jesus actually founded the church, and that it was for a purpose, opened up my eyes to the Eucharist. And once my eyes were open to the Eucharist, there was no going back. The Catholic Church was it, and I was becoming Catholic, and I will never go back because of the Eucharist, because of its importance. It's such a gift from God. It's helped me. It's another piece that's helped me understand who I am by understanding more of who God is. He wasn't only present as Jesus 2,000 some years ago walking the earth. Jesus left himself with us in the Eucharist. And he is present to us, body and soul, throughout the world at the altar. And it's just so beautiful, and it is such a connection. You can't, I don't think anyone could even come up with a way to be connected with our Creator more than that. It's just not possible. It's just so perfect.
You can be in the church, you can be immersed in religion without letting Jesus in your heart. And it's important to remember to not be like the Pharisees, who knew the scriptures, who were very religious. We need to always approach Jesus with childlike faith. To say, show me, who are you? Show me what you want for me. So that we're always working to conform our stubborn wills to his will.